Hello, dear friends. Gold is back in the limelight because of inflation. When everything collapses, the only safe haven left is active assets and precious metals. Opinion piece. Gold fever returns. Gold is once again the safe haven. Inflation drives gold buying. High market volatility and inflation. The price of goods and services is rising. The world economy is now on its knees. The stock market behaves like a hot air balloon. In times of crisis, better not to make moves. Elon Musk causes Bitcoin to fall again. Basel III starts at the end of June on gold. Basel IV accord to be implemented in January 23. Space Force commander fired. Hundreds of mountaineers trapped in Nepal. Let's start. Amid inflation and geopolitical tensions, economic analysts believed that gold will reach $1,850 an ounce and climb to $2,000 by the second half of the year, according to the Russian agency Sputnik. This prompted billionaire Sam Zell to reconsider this attitude to reward gold and share some tips for investing in gold wisely. As of Friday morning, May 14th, the US stock market remained down. Canada down, Europe down, India down, China down, all shown by the market index, though not reported in the media. The inflation monster is rearing its head around the world because of the health crisis. Consumer prices rose 4.2% in the 12 months throughout April, up from 2.6% in March, marking the largest increase in September 2008. Rising consumer prices can push up interest rates. Inflation, which measures the rate at which the prices of goods and services increase, was driven by higher automobile and food prices in April. Inflation is a generalized increase in the prices of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. Financial stress. Financial stress occurs as a result of economic problems that generate anxiety and produce feelings of vulnerability or scarcity. A good control of finances is essential to prevent this type of stress and its possible negative effects on physical and mental health. To prevent financial stress, it is necessary to maintain good control of our finances. But if we have already contracted it, its effects can be reduced by addressing the financial problem quickly. Planning our finances, reducing our expenses, and starting to create a savings habit. In times of crisis, it is better not to make changes, but to be firm and constant in the resolutions and determination in which we were the day before the desolation. Sorrows were not made for beasts, but for men. But if men feel them too much, they become beasts. Tip. Earlier this month, US billionaire Sam Zell warned Bloomberg that inflation is swirling literally everywhere, and that now is when gold can help economically. In the wake of these statements and rising prices in the precious metal, Wall Street is shifting currencies and bonds into gold with the prospect that this price will rise sharply in the coming months. In quotes, one proven way to profit from inflation is to own rare assets, such as gold, that have been appreciating for centuries, said Wall Street analyst Charles Ortel. Why inflation is at a 12-year high? The Bureau of Labor Statistics released numbers indicating that the average price level of consumer goods has increased 4.2% since this time last year. This is the highest rate since 2008. In other words, the average consumer earning the same wage this year has taken a pay cut when considering that they can actually buy with their paycheck. How to invest? Analyst Charles Ortle noted that the decision to purchase gold depends largely on the local laws where you want to invest. For example, in the US, in quotes, investors in physical gold or precious metal pay significant taxes and holding costs. So, in these cases, he suggests it would be more prudent to invest in well-managed mining companies to pay regular dividends and have low production costs that operate in countries where expropriation risks are low. In quotes again, some like to speculate on smaller mining companies and the theory that large discoveries will have an outsized positive impact for investors. In this case, I caution that it is more difficult to attract strong management to this junior place. As for ETFs, they can be loaded with a mix of large and small plays and include physical precious metals. The analyst explained. An ETF, exchange traded fund, or exchange trade, is a hybrid financial product that matches stocks with the mutual fund structure. It's similar to a mutual fund, but unlike a mutual fund, it is listed on a secondary market or a stock exchange. To get a more precise idea, we can imagine an ETF as a diversified basket of securities or financial assets. This basket may contain company stocks, bonds, commodities, indices. Its price, therefore, rises or falls depending on the performance of the benchmark index or of the listed securities that make up the basket. According to Ortel, choosing among these investment options will require one to understand the personal tax consequences. So, he recommends consulting with an investment advisor before making any investment in gold or any other type of metal. I am not an expert, only a journalist, but my personal advice is universal, not to put all the eggs in the same basket. Housing market downturn. More than 4 million Americans are now skipping mortgage payments, according to the Atlantis report. Federal government debt is now approaching 109% of GDP. Many businesses are bankrupt and will not reopen. Some may reopen with reduced staff. We are on the verge of the biggest housing market crash in US history. Wait until you find out that your real estate taxes are going up much higher. The current unemployment rate is much higher than it was during the Great Depression. Most of the economy is on its knees, with countless small and medium-sized businesses that will never reopen. More than 100 US companies have already closed permanently during this crisis, and that represents millions of jobs that will never come back. Homeless encampments are growing every day. Meanwhile, the super-rich are buying subway bunkers with armed defense for fear of social collapse. High volatility. High volatility and market inflation, according to the Atlantis report. Earlier this week, the government reported that the consumer inflation rose to the highest level in 13 years. Wholesale prices are also rising higher and higher. The stock market behaves like a hot air balloon. It rises miraculously. It ignores all adverse economic forces such as inflation, high unemployment, material shortages, etc. This remains truly one of the most disconnected markets in history. High volatility is generally not a good sign. There doesn't need to be a catalyst for a breakout in either direction. It's all fear of risk versus risk tolerance because of greed. High volatility indicates a breakdown in uniformity. This volatility is a hedge fund play. They want a second big dip. The market is controlled by their software. Fear of inflation, chip shortages are manufactured reasons. If there is inflation, the value of companies is higher, not lower. Inflation, if it squeezes profit margins due to input cost or takes away future demand, and that is bad. Otherwise, Venezuela would be the best place to live. Study what happened in the 70s, the decade of inflation. Stocks didn't do well. The effects of inflation on the stock market are more than just inflated stock values. When inflation picks up, investors anticipate rate hikes in an environment where 0% rates have helped support the market since 2008. When the value of cash goes down, he thinks companies in the stock market will do very well when their customers can't afford as many goods. However, commodity stocks are safe havens for inflation because they represent intrinsic value in an environment where government-backed fiat money becomes less valuable. God pattern. Basel III or third starts at the end of June with the gold standard. At the end of June, the Basel III Accords that make gold and precious metals tier 1 assets come into effect. The gold standard could be implemented at that time, according to Rafapal. Basel III is a voluntary global regulatory framework on bank capital adequacy, stress testing, and market liquidity risk. This third installment of the Basel Accords was developed in response to deficiencies in financial regulation revealed by the 2007 and 8 financial crisis. It aims to strengthen bank capital requirements by increasing minimum capital requirements, holding high-quality liquid assets, and reducing leverage. The Basel III standard aims to strengthen the requirements of the Basel II standard on banks' minimum capital ratios. In addition, it introduces requirements on the holding of liquid assets and funding stability, thus seeking to mitigate the risk of a bank run. The Federal Reserve announced in December 2011 that it would implement substantially all of the Basel III rules. It made it clear that they would apply not only to banks, but also to all institutions with more than $50 billion in assets. This implementing act of the Basel III Accords in the European Union has been the new legislative package on prudential requirements for credit institutions and investment firms. The new package, adopted in 2013, replaced the Capital Requirement Directives. On December 7, 2017, ECB head Mario Draghi declared the Basel III reforms completely for banks in the European Union. Impact of Basel III. In the United States, higher capital requirements resulted in contractions in trading operations and in the number of staff employed on trading floors. An OECD study published on February 17, 2011, estimated that the medium-term impact of Basel III implementation on GDP growth would be in the range of below 0.05% to minus 0.15% per year. Economic output would be affected primarily by an increase in the bank lending spread, as banks pass on increased bank funding cost due to higher capital requirements to their customers. To meet the capital requirements originally in effect in 2015, it was estimated that banks would increase their loan spread by an average of about 15 basis points. The capital requirements in place beginning in 2019 could increase the bank lending spread by approximately 50 basis points. The estimated effects on GDP growth assume no active monetary policy response. To the extent that monetary policy is no longer constrained by the zero lower bound, the impact of Basel III on economic output could be offset by a reduction in policy rates by approximately 30 to 80 basis points. Basel III was also criticized for negatively affecting the stability of the financial system by increasing banks' incentives to game the regulatory framework. Basel IV. The Basel IV standards are changes to global bank capital requirements that were agreed in 2017 and are due to be implemented in January 2023. They modify the international banking standards known as Basel Accords. Regulators argue that these changes simply complete the Basel III reforms agreed in principle in 2010 and 2011. The Basel Committee itself calls them simply finalized reforms, and the UK government has dubbed them Basel 3.1 in quotes. Critics of reform, particularly those in the banking sector, argue that Basel IV requires a significant increase in capital and should be treated as a distinct round of reforms. Bitcoin news. Elon Musk sends Bitcoin plummeting again with a tweet. The price of Bitcoin has fallen after a tycoon, Elon Musk, hinted last Sunday that Tesla would have sold or was going to sell its assets in this cryptocurrency. Amid speculation about the sale of Tesla's holdings, the cryptocurrency fell below $43,000 but began to recover after the billionaire refuted fears. Bitcoin plunges 17% after announcement that Tesla will stop accepting it. The price of Bitcoin, the world's most popular cryptocurrency, plunged more than 17% after Tesla co-founder and top executive Elon Musk announced that the company would stop accepting the cryptocurrency as payment for its vehicles. Bitcoin succumbs to a chain reaction. The week beginning May 10 will be remembered by many crypto market participants as a tweet from Elon Musk and other events set off a chain reaction that set Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency prices reeling. Spain. Firms that will ride the recovery. Fundación La Caixa, El Corte Inglés, Inditex, Telefónica, Santander, and Mercadona are the companies that will contribute most to the recovery of GDP and to the generation after the crisis derived from the healthcare crisis, as well as to the creation of a digital and sustainable economy model, according to the advice the Éxito Empresarial study. The case of an alleged Russian interference is closed in Spain for lack of evidence. Although the information had not transcended until now, a report of the National Court that has yet come to light reproaches the agents for having only provided the testimony of an informant and links to information published in the media. The issue of Russian interference in the referendum, of October 1st, 2017 in Catalonia has been causing a stir for years, but it has not been until now that it has been known that the National Court filed the case for not finding minimal indications of a crime. Vegan activists protest in Madrid. Vegan activists staged a peculiar protest in Madrid on May 15, in which they mimicked human flesh for sale in makeshift containers, as if it were animal flesh in a supermarket. About 10 protesters covered themselves in red paint to imitate blood, while standing on giant trays of meat. The Bolivian government gave in to pressure from truckers, and there will be no train between Chile and Bolivia. After 5 days of blockades throughout the country, the truckers' unions managed to impose themselves and definitively suspend the reactivation of the railroad, which Chile had granted Bolivia as a compensation for having taken away its access to the sea in the War of the Pacific. The brief resurrection of the Arica-La Paz Railroad, which would link these cities of Chile and Bolivia, was definitively aborted by the Bolivian transportation unions, who opposed its circulation because, according to them, it would take away their jobs. Their demands were fully met in the national government. The business sector regrets having lost the opportunity to have more transportation routes for their products. Short news. Internet Day. Internet Day was celebrated on May 17, a day that is commemorated in most parts of the world, whose main objective was to raise awareness of the possibilities offered by new technologies to improve information and the standard of living of societies. A better internet starts with you, more connected, more secure. This was the slogan chosen to celebrate Internet Day 2021. Security of the internet is seriously threatened by viruses, worms, trojans, etc. Therefore, this May 17 is intended to promote positive changes and raise awareness of the cybersecurity. We must use technology responsibly, respectfully, and critically. Israel is destroying media buildings in Gaza. The destruction of 2 major Gaza buildings, housing 20 media outlets, was shocking and predictable. History shows that if the media is not present, it is much more difficult to report what is going on. On Tuesday, Israel bombed the 10-story Al-Jawara Tower, causing it to collapse. Before doing so, it had warned that airstrikes were coming. The next day, it bombed the 14-story Al-Shorouk Tower, and also warned that it would be bombed. Trapped in Nepal, hundreds of mountaineers asked their countries for help to get out of Kathmandu. They went in search of adventure and were met with a roadblock, and as unexpected as it was unpleasant. Hundreds of Europeans are currently in Kathmandu, Nepal, with no option to return home. The current situation in the country, with an increase in cases in recent weeks, has forced the country's authorities to impose serious restrictions, including the cancellation of flights out of Nepal until at least May 31st. Astronautics. China makes history by landing a rover on Mars on its first mission. China marked a milestone in its space career by successfully landing a rover on the Martian surface on its first mission to the Red Planet, something that had only been achieved before after several attempts by the United States and the former Soviet Union, although the latter failed to complete the feat. SpaceX launches into space 52 more satellites for its Starlink internet network. SpaceX launched into space Saturday from Florida the recyclable Falcon 9 rocket with a new batch of 52 satellites for its Starlink internet network after finding a favorable atmospheric conditions for the mission. Excuse me. Space Force commander fire after claiming army under attack by neo-Marxist critical race theory. The commander of the US Space Force unit has been removed from his leadership role after a podcast appearance in which he claimed that Marxist ideologies such as critical race theory were undermining the military. Lohmeyer, who commanded the 11th Space Warning Squadron at Buckley Air Force Base, Colorado, appeared on the show to promote his self-published book, in quotes, Irresistible Revolution, the Conquering Aim of Marxism and the Destruction of the US Military. The tome explores the neo-Marxist agenda that he says is infiltrating the military. Jupiter's Legacy. Since its premiere last Friday, Jupiter's Legacy has been making waves on Netflix. The series features a large number of superheroes, both old and new, each with her outhutch, who has the uniqueness of not possessing any superhuman abilities, but has a mysterious artifact that allows him to teleport wherever he wants. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot for listening, dear, very dear friends. Have a good week.